back to Which is the Moon. I'm your Monday hostess, Natalie, and this week's topic is planes of consciousness. Now, this is really actually a rather scientifically studied topic, and it's pretty in-depth, and there's a lot of different theories of mind. So I'm going to begin from where I started with my PhD program and talk about theory building and theory of mind specifically. The mind and how we exist in this place, in this time, and our souls and all of that is a pretty nebulous topic. It's pretty vast and advanced. And there have been many different theories of our mind and our levels of consciousness and how they exist or coexist with one another. So the ones that I'm the most familiar with are the three layers of consciousness that Freud brought forward during his psychoanalytical period, which I have to tell you, as a family, child development and family therapy major, most of Freud's work has been completely debunked as being total shite. The man had a lot of issues. He didn't really conduct his experiments in a scientific manner. He used himself or very close people as subjects, didn't really get outside subjects. But his theories and his ideas still resonate today because many other people, such as Alder and, now I'm drawing a blank, Erickson, Jung, a lot of those people, their theories were sparked off of things that were either proving or disproving Freud. So Freud had three levels of consciousness. He had the conscious mind, the preconscious mind, and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is those things that you are currently aware of, everything that's going on around you, and you being conscious in the present moment. Now, the subconscious mind, or the preconscious mind, dealt with all of the available memories that you didn't physically access in your conscious mind. Okay, so deep locked memories and things like that. Now, it's not the same thing as the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind in Freud's theory was all of the repressed instincts, feelings, and emotions and actions that you have. Okay, and these are things that you actively repress in your conscious mind or in your conscious state. Okay, so that was one theory of mind, and that's one that's very familiar to those of us here in the West. Now, there are lots of other theories of mind. I was going to try to print something that I wanted to show because I found a very interesting correlation a while back in doing some research on tarot, and someone had actually aligned cards of the major arcana to the various different Kabbalistic levels of consciousness. So I'll get to that in a minute. Now, it is widely accepted in a lot of also Western theories that there are between 7 to 12 levels of consciousness. Okay, the Kabbalistic tree of life shows us 12 levels of consciousness, and that's what they view. So I don't have a lot of information on those. That's something I'm still kind of working on. But basically, it is related elementally to air, water, fire, earth. You can relate it to those things. But of course, the higher level is going to be your crown level of consciousness. So it's a lot like having 12 chakras. It's very interesting because the chakra system, although there are 7 chakras that are main, there's actually multiple chakras, many up to like 12 or 13, possibly even more than that. It's interesting how all of those align. So transcendental, those people who engage in transcendental meditation typically talk about 7 layers of consciousness. So at the very bottom level, at your root chakra level, you've got your state of waking consciousness. Here you are, you're kind of awake, you're aware of what's going on around you, and you're going from that. Then you have the sacral chakra, which correlates to your deep sleep. And that's where your consciousness kind of combines with the consciousness of other people's who are also, dreaming and going on. Well, not dreaming, but in deep sleep. Okay, then you go into the state of dreaming. And that consciousness is more of a spiritual awareness of your consciousness. Okay, then you're starting to get into your higher level chakras. You have transcendental, consciousness, which means you have now gone beyond your own consciousness and you're aware of other people's consciousness and being, okay? And I would liken that personally, me, to kind of when you access the Akashic records for someone, if you're certified or if you're qualified to do that, or you have their permission to do that, then you would be, in my opinion, entering a state of transcendental consciousness, because you are aligning in that fifth dimension with their energetic field and you're getting a feel for what's going on in their choices and so forth. Then you have cosmic consciousness. So think about the third eye, cosmic consciousness. And then you have, actually, I guess, yeah, probably. Okay. Actually, I guess that would be like your throat, because third eye would be, God consciousness. Okay. This is where you're beginning to really start to transcend above everything else and be aware of things on a multiple level, on a scale that is godlike. Then unity consciousness would be your crown chakra area. And that's where you become aware of your place within the universe and our oneness of the universe. Okay. So in transcendental meditation, 7 layers of consciousness. Okay. Then you've got the, Abhidharma, which is the Buddhist theory of mind. And in the Buddhist theory of mind, it's my understanding that there are 3 main levels of consciousness. You have mind, which uses your most energy, and mind itself is what we would consider your conscious self. You're using this level of consciousness to make decisions, make judgments about things, form actions, all of that waking conscious stuff. Then you have a sense of your consciousness is of sense. Okay, so that's where you're aware of things on a sensual level by smell, taste, touch, hearing, that sort of thing. And I do want to take a moment to point out that your sense of smell, by the way, is the very first sense that develops in the womb. Yes, babies in the womb smell. And that's why smell is so triggering for many people. That's why aromatherapy is so very effective, and why we use things like incenses to shift our level of consciousness, right? When you go into meditation, you are trying to shift your level of consciousness into a more transcendental, what I would consider transcendental, okay? Going in the transcendental meditation format, you're trying to shift your consciousness from just yourself out into the ether, okay? Then you have what's called store consciousness. And what this is this is where all of your experiences and memories and all of those things are stored, but not just stored, preserved. And that's a real key feature, where they are preserved. And so I want to take a moment here to talk about theory of mind in terms of our understanding of how we understand and make sense of our world. That's essentially what theory of mind is. Theory of mind deals with our understanding of our place here, our understanding of how we fit in, and our awareness of everything that's going on around us and everyone else. Okay. There are so many books on theory of mind, and I have no idea what the dog is doing, but I think he's trying to scratch his way into the room. I had to keep him out because otherwise he's like all over me. You all have seen other videos. He's just like on me constantly and with his face in mine. And I can't do these videos doing that. So anyhow, getting back to what I was saying, I want to make a distinction here between levels of consciousness and dimensions of being. Okay. In quantum theory, quantum physics, there are 10 dimensions. We are 10-dimensional, okay? When we think about this, and Andrea Hess, who runs the Soul Realignment Program, had a beautiful explanation of this. She said you have to think of it as, a lot of times we think of ourselves as, okay, here's our 3rd-dimensional self. Our 3rd-dimensional self is this here. Your 2-dimension and the 1st and 2nd dimension are contained within your 3rd dimension. You cannot exist as we consciously know it in the 1st and 2nd dimensions, okay? It's more mathematical kinds of equations when you get to the 1st dimension, and then like point of light, I think is how she described it. Then your 2 dimension would be like writing on this paper, okay? This is 2-dimensional. There's There's height, there's mass, there's being, but it's flat. There's no depth to it, okay? So a two-dimensional line drawing, that is where you are. Then our third dimension is our physical self and how we experience everything. Fourth dimension is your mind, okay? So theory of mind relates to the fourth dimension of being. And then your fifth dimension and beyond are like your soul and your subconscious, okay? So what you've got going on is you've got multiple layers of being. So your soul, as Ms. Hess kind of described it, and this made perfect sense, encompasses pretty much everything from the fifth dimension on, okay? The fifth dimension is where we connect to others in a psychic level, okay? And it's the lowest level at which we can understand what's going on. So, and where we can connect to others. So that's where you would connect to your Akashic record if you were so looking into that. That goes back to what we talked about a few weeks ago. But dimensions are not the same thing as mind, because mind is one of the dimensions in which we exist in our mind. And it's interesting. Dr. Wayne Dyer had made a statement, I'm going to paraphrase here, but if you're interested, it's Dr. Wayne Dyer. Look him up. It's D-I-E-R. He's great. He said there's an irony to thinking about things in the past or making plans for the future, because the past is done, it's gone, and your future is never certain. So all the plans we can make, there's a futility to that. There's a futility to thinking about the past and mourning decisions that we made that we wish we'd made differently. I think a lot of times we like to get nostalgic and think about the way things used to be. The problem with that is that we're using up our now. We're using up our conscious moment right here, which is all we ever get. Now is all we ever get. So right now, you're doing that. However, the interesting part to that is that in a way, in your mind, you're doing a form of time travel. You're projecting your mind forward into a projected future, a plan for future, which may not be the future you get, but your past is always your past, right? Those memories are always there. So you can time travel back and sometimes access some of that memory and information to keep you from making the same mistakes twice. But my point to this whole part of this is that dimension is not the same thing as levels of consciousness. So please do not confuse the two concepts. Dimension and states of being are one thing, and levels of consciousness or awareness of your body, your third dimension in this dimension, are vastly different. So sometimes when you're doing research on levels of consciousness, you'll see people refer to 1D, 2D, 3D. They're talking about dimensions, which actually is not the same thing as consciousness. So just keep that in mind. So those are just kind of the basics of what are the different planes of consciousness. Again, I've seen up to 13 mentioned, and I didn't bother to go through each and every theory because they are so numerous. I strongly recommend that if you want to learn more about levels of consciousness and how we employ that, then I would definitely recommend that you get on the computer and kind of research it a little bit for yourself and find the theory that seems to make the most sense for you. Now, what does all that mean for us as witches? Here's how I relate levels of consciousness to my practice as a witch, okay? I have talked in almost every single video I've done on here and on my personal channel about the importance of meditation. When we are working with the craft, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about witchcraft, but what we're doing really is energy work in a lot of ways, okay? We're working with the energies of plants. We're working with the energies of the universe. We're working with the energies of certain vibrations that come with color, okay? Because colors are planes of waves of energy, right? And we perceive it as the visible spectrum. So we correlate those colors to specific things. We're conscious of those colors, and we're utilizing that energy to push forward a goal that we have. That's what spellcraft is, right? It's essentially a prayer on steroids. We're sending that wish out, that prayer out into the universe, using these boosted energies from different colored candles, herbs, incenses, smells, things like that. Okay? But we're connecting all of that to each other through our conscious mind, right? And we always talk about how visualization is important. Well, visualization is very firmly a part of your consciousness. And when you are really into spellcraft and you're deep in it, I believe you actually experience a shift of consciousness that takes you into a transcendental state. You are now outside of yourself and within the universe to manipulate those energies to achieve the goal that you want. So being aware of the levels of consciousness and where you are currently operating in those levels of consciousness will actually help your spellcraft better. Because if you're distracted by things going on over here in the sensory level and you're not really conscious of what you're doing when you're doing your spellcraft, it's not going to be as effective. And that is key. You need to really have a good visualization and a great focus when doing craft work in order to get that energy where it needs to be. And that is going to require your level of consciousness to be, one, beginning in the conscious and then moving into the transcendental or the subconscious mind, whichever theory of mind you want to operate from. When I'm doing spellcraft, I don't really consider theory of mind specifically. I don't go, oh gosh, today I'm going to try to use Freud's theory of mind and I want to go from my conscious to my subconscious and dig in. Okay. I do think it's important to note, especially taking Andrea Hess's terminology. She talks about using pendulum dowsing as a manner to access the Akashic record. I'm still new to the program, so I don't know yet. But I will tell you that it makes sense because it's going to cause you to be very precise in what you're seeking. Here's my thing. She says that there's no magic in using a pendulum to dowse. That the movements are not coming from an outside source. They're coming from deep within you on a subconscious level. So she's utilizing some of that terminology without really defining it, which is something she had just talked against doing just seconds before in the video. So, your subconscious mind is your awareness outside of conscious awareness. Okay. For example, think of it as instinct. Okay. So you're walking down the street. It's a dark street. And suddenly you get a very odd feeling and it makes you, the hair on your arm stands up. You kind of start to look around to see what's going on, right? You know something's up. It could just be there's a dog watching you, right? It could be that somebody's starting to walk behind you. Somebody suddenly appeared behind you, but your instinct, that subconscious, picked up on some factor that made you go, and made you aware of that situation. So it's I would think of subconscious as almost instinctive in action. Okay, you're not consciously aware of why all of a sudden you became nervous, but you are now conscious of what's making you nervous. Yeah, see? So it's interesting to see how that's done, but she says that your hand is making minute movements. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think she's doing that as a way to more mainstream her modality of accessing the Akashic records, and I could be totally wrong. She may completely believe there's nothing mystical or magical about using a pendulum. I disagree. I think it depends on the context. If you're accessing your own Akashic record, then yeah, it could be that those movements are coming from deep within you and it's vibrating through you and causing the pendulum to move. But I think that you can access spirit or divine. Her argument is that there's no magic to it because you're a divine being. So you're just doing what is your divinity. So if you're looking at it like that, she may have a point. But to me, magic, as I define it, is simply manipulation and use of the energetic fields that surround us all the time. And because we want to use the term magic, but remember that magic comes from magus, and magus is a mage. A mage is a knowing person, right? A person who's connected to what? Say it with me, kids. Divinity. So I simply think that it's all one and the same. Okay, you can give it whatever name you want. You want to call it deep meditation, connecting into to the divine, tapping into your own divine. If you want to call it connecting to God, you can call it whatever you want, but it's all the same thing. And I do agree with the idea that we are embodiments of the divine within ourselves, both masculine and feminine. And I think that's something that you see often in many witchcraft traditions. Not just in Wicca, but in others as well, that we embody elements of the divine because we are created from the divine, right? So therefore, there are always aspects of the creator in the created. So think about this. When you draw a picture, your style of art is going to be vastly different than somebody else's, right? Even if you're copying, like, for example, I have a girl that I know that can draw any Disney character that you want. But I always know when it's her drawing versus, oh, they copied this, they printed this up off the Disney site. It's distinct. There's something about it that vibrates with her energy, and it's very clear that that's something that we shelter. So she's pretty freaking talented, by the way. I'm trying to encourage her to look into maybe doing some illustrations for me on some of my, upcoming books. So anyway, that is kind of my spiel on the differences between levels of consciousness, dimensional levels in which we exist, how those two come together to kind of meld into a one sort of spot, and theories of mind and how we use that in the craft. So I hope that this video wasn't too rambly for you guys, and I hope that it made sense. If you have questions, please feel free to leave them in the down bar. Any comments, suggestions are appreciated. So thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all have a wonderful week, and blessed be.